Picture the moment. Somewhere in Africa, tens of thousands of years ago, one human, the first one, looks up as the sun drops toward the horizon and turns the sky to fire. What did they think it meant? Here's the problem. That human never existed. Not because sunsets are new. The sun has been doing this for 4.5 billion years. Spectacular and completely indifferent, long before anything with eyes was around to notice. The problem is the person we're looking for. There was no first human standing there. And once you understand why that question breaks apart in your hands, the real story turns out to be about something much stranger than one face turned toward an orange sky. It's about two completely different things pretending, for your entire life, to be one. Here's the trap almost every version of this question falls into. It assumes humanity arrived, like a light switching on. One generation, apes. The next, us, fully formed, staring up, wondering. That's not what happened. Homo sapiens didn't begin at a single point in time. Fossils from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco push our species back roughly 300,000 years. And even that isn't a starting line. It's just how far back the evidence happens to survive. Before that skull, there was a parent almost exactly like it. And before that parent, another. Somewhere in that chain, not quite human became human. And nobody can draw the line because there isn't one to draw. This is actually an old philosophical puzzle wearing new clothes. Add one grain of sand to a table. Is it a heap yet? No. Add another. Still no. Keep going. And at some point, you're undeniably looking at a heap of sand. But you can never point to the exact grain that did it. Philosophers call it the Sorite's paradox. Evolution runs on the same logic. There was no first heap. There was no first human. Which means there was no first sunset watcher either. I'll be honest. This is the part that stopped me while researching this. I went looking for a person and found out the person was never there to find. So if there's no one to find, what exactly are we chasing? Turns out two separate things got smuggled into that one question. And they didn't arrive on the same day. They didn't even arrive in the same millennium. The first thing is a reaction. The second is a meaning. And your body learned the first one long before your mind learned the second. Right now, somewhere in your brain, a cluster of roughly 20,000 neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus is tracking the light hitting your eyes. As that light shifts toward red and fades, it quietly tells your pineal gland to start releasing melatonin. Your cortisol drifts. Your body temperature starts to drop. None of this requires a thought. None of it requires you. A lizard's brain does a version of this. So does a bird's. This circadian machinery is inherited, not invented, passed down through hundreds of millions of years of animals that needed to know when the dangerous dark part of the day was coming. In other words, something in you already had an opinion about sunsets before anything remotely human existed to watch one. Then there's the second thing, the part that actually interests us, meaning interpretation, the story you tell yourself about what the colors are doing. And here's where it gets strange. Jane Goodall, watching wild chimpanzees at Gombe for decades, documented something she called waterfall displays. Chimps approaching a roaring waterfall and performing what looked almost like ritual, swaying, throwing rocks, standing transfixed for minutes at a time in front of something they gained nothing from and couldn't eat, use, or mate with. She and other primatologists also described moments of chimps going still at dusk, apparently absorbed in the changing sky. Nobody claims to know what's happening inside a chimpanzee in that moment, but some researchers have wondered aloud whether this is what awe looks like before it has a language attached to it, a feeling with nowhere yet to go. If that's right, awe is older than us. Meaning is not. And that's when the question you actually came here to answer quietly falls apart and reassembles as a completely different one. You didn't come here to find out who first saw a sunset. Something was always watching sunsets. Reptiles, birds, early primates, none of them wondering anything about it. The real question is who first stood there and thought, this means something. Who was first to turn a wavelength of light into a story? That's not a fossil hunt anymore. That's a hunt for the first mind. So, when did a sunset stop being just a stimulus and start being a symbol? The clues aren't in bones, they're in ochre. At sites like Blombo's Cave on the South African coast, archaeologists have found chunks of red ochre deliberately engraved with abstract cross-hatched patterns, dating back roughly 70,000 to 100,000 years, alongside shell beads pierced and strung, apparently for wearing. None of this helped anyone hunt, eat, or survive a cold night. It only makes sense if the person making it believed a pattern, a color, a decorated body could represent something beyond itself. That's the entire foundation meaning is built on, the ability to let one thing stand for another. That capacity, researchers sometimes call it theory of mind, is also what let one human assume another human had a mind of their own. one worth communicating with. And once you have that, plus language to carry it, you have everything required to look at a red sky and not just feel something, but say something. To turn a feeling into a shared idea, to turn a private reaction into a myth that could survive you. That's the actual birth we've been looking for. Not a person, a capability. And it didn't arrive in a single sunset. It accumulated generation by generation, the way heat accumulates before water finally boils. Here's the detail that genuinely unsettled me once I saw it clearly. The sunset itself never changed. The physics that paints the sky red and orange at dusk, sunlight scattering through a thicker slice of atmosphere, the blue wavelengths getting filtered out along the way, has worked essentially the same way since Earth had an atmosphere worth scattering light through. Long before mammals, long before eyes, even, the show was already running on a loop with no audience. What changed was never the performance. It was the audience's capacity to interpret it. And once that capacity switched on, something remarkable happened almost everywhere, independently, with no communication between the groups involved. Ancient Egyptians described the sun god Ra sailing through the underworld each night, fighting chaos in the dark before being reborn at dawn. In Aztec belief, the sun descended each evening into a kind of death it had to earn its way out of. In Japan's earliest myths, the sun goddess Amaterasu once withdrew into a cave, plunging the world into darkness until she was coaxed back out. Completely separate civilizations, oceans apart, no contact with each other, and they all reach for the same shape of story. The sun dies, and the sun returns. That's not coincidence. That's the oldest story problem our species ever shared. Before writing, before agriculture, before cities, every human alive already had this one thing in common. Every single evening, a light disappearing, uninvited, and a mind that couldn't stand to leave it unexplained. The sunset may be the first thing humanity ever collaborated on without knowing it was collaborating. So there was never one first sunset witness. There were billions of almost firsts, animal ancestors whose bodies reacted with no story attached, then early humans slowly gaining the tools to attach one, then every single person since, quietly rerunning both processes at once without noticing. Tonight, if you happen to catch one, watch what actually happens inside you. First, something older than language. Your temperature drops half a degree, your body starts winding down, a lizard's inheritance doing its ancient job without asking permission. And then, a half second later, something newer arrives and starts narrating. Beautiful, sad, peaceful, another day gone. That second voice is maybe 100,000 years old. It is, historically speaking, brand new. You're not watching a sunset. You're watching two different eras of your own evolution argue about what it means. Live, every evening, for free. Try this tonight if you can. Find a sunset, actual sky, not a screen, and watch it without reaching for your phone the entire time. Don't describe it to yourself in words at first. Just notice. Is there a moment where you can feel the reaction arrive before the meaning does? A flicker of something before your mind starts calling it beautiful? Most people can't separate the two. They happen too close together, but some people swear they can catch the gap. Tell me which one you are.